Our first speaker, GUNTER WIPPEL, studied economics at the University of Freiburg, Germany, and holds a degree in political economics. He works as a lecturer in economics for adults in 2 schools, has been involved in the anti-nuclear movement since the 1980s, has dealt since then with issues of uranium exploitation, environmental deterioration, and human rights. He co-organized the 1988 Leave Uranium in the Ground speaking tour in Germany, worked as coordinator in 1992 for the World Uranium Hearing in Salzburg, Austria, and published repeatedly in respective medias on these subjects. Since 2008, he's involved with the African uranium mining issues, co-founded and works with uraniumnetwork.org, co-organized the conferences on the impact of uranium mining on health and environment 2012 in Bamako, Mali. And were you under siege at that time? No. No, good. And in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania as well, speaking to us for NGOs on uranium exploitation throughout Germany, etc. I think, welcome please, GUNTER WIPPEL.
Yeah, well, it sounds pretty impressive, but in the end we haven't stopped uranium mining yet. Okay, so we got to do a little bit more. So I think the workshop here is going to be a little bit different from the other workshops. Like I don't want to present a long time, just a few little ideas that we have, some experiences that we made. And I think it's up to all of us to come up with new ideas or plans and strategies and so on. So it's not just we present and you listen. It's more like an interactive thing, I think, what's supposed to be. I think so. You know, we can't say all the things that should be done. So actually where I come from, and this is just my personal history, is I come from an area in Germany, in southwest Germany, where the first nuclear power plant in Germany was stopped by public resistance. It was not the first power plant in Germany that was built, but that was the first that was stopped. The place is called Wiel, and today there's no power plant there. There's still the trees growing, and it's due to public resistance that this thing was stopped. And this basically was also the birthplace and birth time of the anti-nuclear movement in Germany. And actually, just across the border in Switzerland, just, I don't know, 100 kilometers away, not even, there was another place where Swiss companies wanted to build a nuclear power plant at Kaiser Augst. And this one was stopped also by public resistance. And there was a lot of what they call non-violent direct action. There was a lot of confrontation with the police, but there was also a lot of work behind the scenes that was not so obvious. And so I want to report a little bit from that and a few things that we have done after that, and maybe that gives a few ideas where we can go from here. One of the things we found the most important is information and education of the people who are affected. Because the people in the areas, they don't know what radiation is. They don't know all the little details about radioactivity and health impacts and so on. And now in Germany and Central European countries, that's probably different, but in countries like in African countries or other places of the world, it's still like that. And the companies can go anywhere and tell any kind of nonsense and they will get away with it. So the education and information of people is very important. Building groups, committees, networks, things that are locally rooted, grassroots groups, I think is an important part. The clarification of the aims may be important. We had long discussions about the declaration here. What's the aim of that declaration? You know, who is it aimed at? For example, when the power plant was going to be built in our area, people were saying no to the power plant in our area, and soon realized, well, we can't say no to the power plant in our area, but other people, well, they can have it. So the aim was pretty quickly expanded to no power plant at Wiel and nowhere else, like we say, or I said in my recommendation, here, moratorium on uranium mining in Quebec and in the rest of the world. First of all, yes, it's Quebec because we are here, but it's also for the rest of the world. We can't say, oh yes, the other guys, they can have the shit. Then discussing possibilities of action, I think it's important because there's all kinds of possibilities what you can do and making decisions. But one of the things was important in our area was to make consensus decisions. So everybody would agree on something and not a lot of people agree, the others have to obey, because that gives the thing a strength. And indigenous people know that very well, First Nations people. You know, you make a decision in consensus, and once you have that consensus, you go. You have a lot of strength with that. So actually, after all this thing was over, I think there was something like 3 pillars, we call it, of resistance that we could identify, and that were all of them important. One was kind of direct action, like nonviolent direct actions. The building site of this nuclear power plant was occupied. This is not to say this is exactly to work the same way with uranium mining. It's just giving an example of what we did in our area. Then the issue was taken to the streets. There were lots of demonstrations, vigils, info booths done in the city and everywhere. A regular newsletter was distributed in the villages, in the whole area, so to keep people up on the issue, keep them updated, what's happening, what's going on. The other important branch was lobbying. Lobby work with members of parliament. In this case, it was a provincial parliament that was making the decisions, not the federal parliament. But that's a difficult thing to do sometimes, and some people don't want to do it. So let those people do what they want to do. Some want to do direct action. Others want to do lobbying. So it was important also to have all 3 of those avenues being followed. And the third one was legal action. Actually, the license to build this nuclear power plant was taken to court. And the first instance, lower instance court, said, with a very flimsy argument, no to the license. They canceled it. And that was a big boost for the movement, because people knew, okay, we are on the right way, and we have a legal backup. It's not just some farmers saying, no, we don't want it. It's also acknowledged in court that we have good reasons why we say it. And at that time, the situation was like that. The nuclear industry had 15, 20, 30 experts, doctors, professors, I don't know what. We had about 5 experts, because there was no, how do you say, no anti-nuclear environmental think tanks or anything. And most of them were students, but they were able to convince the court that we had good arguments, and the court followed it. In the second instance, the court overturned this decision, but at that time, the movement had been already so strong that they weren't able to build the power plant anyway. I don't want to get into all the details. In addition, I think it was very important to build alliances all across the people in the area. And it can tell you, there was from farmers who were Catholics, Conservative Party people, all across to left-wing communist students, everybody. People were involved in that movement. And they all said no to that nuclear power plant. And we set aside all our other differences, all our other opinions. We don't advertise for our party politics, for nothing within that movement. We have one aim, to stop this one nuclear power plant. That made it very efficient, I think. And yeah. So now after that nuclear power plant was stopped, I moved to many other things like uranium mining issues. And a lot of that is very different because it's very far away from where we live. In Canada, it's different. It's very, rather close to uranium mining. But we think that helped were also to have a clear aim. What do we want? Where do we want to get at? We had to have a good logo, which was very simple to understand for everybody, and to have a clear slogan, which says, what's our campaign all about? And we used good educational materials, which were developed over time, that didn't fall from heaven. So they were worked out, and there were, of course, things that weren't so good, they were improved. Good posters and so on. On the international level, I think we have done a lot of work as uraniumnetwork.org. And our cooperation is mainly with third world countries and mainly with Africa at this time, since like 7 or 8 years. And what has come out for me or for us is you have to have a long-term relationship with the NGOs you're working with in those countries. And there can be boosts like conferences, seminars, workshops. But in the meantime, you still have to be in touch with the people there, support them, work together with them on an everyday basis, basically. And we have provided or helped to provide educational materials about radiation, health impacts of radiation, environmental impacts, and so on. We have done conferences, seminars.
I take the pleasure of introducing Andrew NIDECKER, who is a radiologist and scientist and anti-nuclear activist. I had the pleasure of meeting him at the Basel IPPNW meetings, which were incredible meetings. And if you can ever attend an IPPNW meeting, highly recommend it. You don't have to be a doctor to attend the IPPNW meetings. And you have to be a doctor to join any of our organizations, incidentally. And our solidarity is felt here during these last 3 days. So that with 30 years of experience, I think Dr. NIDECKER has something interesting to offer.
Some of the conclusions, what we found in the Ulm meeting was that even background radiation, there is a correlation between higher background radiation and a somewhat higher incidence of cancer as compared to regions with lower background radiations. These studies are now out, and they are out in peer-reviewed journals and in the respected literature. So we now have different data, and I was talking about facts, what we have to learn. It's not just the market facts and the figures of the nuclear industry, it's also new facts published in the medical literature. And one consensus was that there is no threshold dose underneath which radiation could be harmless. Even doses as 1 millisievert cause measurable health effects. The conclusions were as follows: background radiation and radiation in medical diagnostics can cause health effects. Nuclear power plants in normal operation and the testing of weapons cause measurable health effects, and obviously the increased radioactivity in mining areas. The epidemiological studies showed that use the concept of collective dose show that health risks of low-dose radiation can be reliably predicted and quantified. And one thing, everybody always refers to the ICRP, the International Commission of Radiation Practice, which studied the Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors. And these studies nowadays are not only debated, they are recognized as being outdated, because new radiation biology shows different effects, and we need to know that those states by the ICRP, they are outmoded. And we need to have an improved risk-based concept of radiation protection and stricter implementation of radiation exposure minimization. Here are some quotes. New evidence of effects of chronic ionizing low-level radiation. There is a German study, the KICK study, which detected that there's a doubling of leukemia in small children in the vicinity of nuclear power plants. There is a study there are 2 studies coming from Australia and Great Britain which show that after CT exams, if you have children which receive CT exams, they have an increased incidence of leukemia and brain tumors. And I gave a quote down here. And there are also other effects. You know, previously we would learn that insects are very radiation resistant, but nowadays look what happens. People from the States, Muller and Musso, they detected in the Chernobyl area that there is increased mutational loads in plants and animals as a result of the exposure to radiation around Chernobyl. And there is a Japanese researcher, Mrs. Nohara, she showed effects on butterflies, and I can show you a few pictures of that. This is the pale bluegrass butterfly in a healthy state, and she fed these butterflies small doses with increasing radiation load and detected this. Detected that there are changes in the wings and in the morphology of the insect. So you can say now that even in insects you see effects on low doses of radiation. Now, just as a short summary why I, as a radiologist, I'm against nuclear energy. There are 7 main reasons, and you heard many more reasons by Michael Schneider this morning. But he mentioned the costs. The costs are high and climbing, not just due to the maintenance and the investment, but the insurance premiums are climbing up. The waste management now needs to be taken serious. The construction of new power plants is only possible when you have state guarantees, and or in some countries where corruption takes place and gives licenses without asking the people. The second reason, safety, terrorism, they don't just need to bomb the core of a nuclear reactor, they just can cut the electricity to the cooling system. That was what was happening at the Daiichi Fukushima plants, that the cooling system didn't work anymore, besides the earthquake which was happened before. Then the waste issue is unresolved, and we also heard about the water consumption and the water contamination, as happens in Japan now, where the fishermen, they cannot go out to fish because all the fish are contaminated. Then the radiation issue I was briefly discussing, and the uranium as a resource, it's not renewable. Okay, there are many places where uranium is mined. Kazakhstan is the biggest exporter, but the reserves finally are limited. And one day, after maybe 50 or 100 years, depending on how many, in theory, you would end with uranium. And finally, the proliferation issue, highly enriched uranium, is a worry for us doctors of IPPNW because it can be converted into nuclear bombs. Enrichment beyond 20% is dangerous. That's why I just heard the talk in one of the neighboring audiences where a young woman talked about new ways to produce radiopharmaceuticals without the method of highly enriched uranium. Now, the World Nuclear Industry Status Report, we had one of the 2 main authors, Michael Schneider, this morning. Fantastic talk, very important. You should all look into it and at least read the general summary and know about this report and rub it under the noses of people who have never heard of it. It's really a very strong argument because it's the market which will probably influence the secondary market of the uranium. Because the market of nuclear power, if that market goes down, the production of uranium will need to go down. And I wanted to show you some data of this report, but Michael did it already, so I cut out those slides. Just the quotes by the 2 authors. Michael said, it's a portrait of an industry suffering from cumulative impacts of the world economic crisis, effects of Fukushima, competition, and own planning and management difficulties. And Froggatt said, the market for nuclear is shrinking year by year, while renewable energy deployment continues at pace, and with increasing number of countries, nuclear energy is getting more expensive, and as we heard, some companies are even bankrupt. So I'm not going into that report at this stage. Now, how to phase out? In Switzerland, IPPNW for decades, talked about fighting nuclear energy, and we were always with all other NGOs debating and discussing, and now we have a phase out. But at one stage we said, we cannot just oppose nuclear energy, we have to support all those groups and people and enterprises who produce products and discuss the renewable energy. So we formed an association which had a think tank character. It was supported by the Basel government, and it was founded in 1998 by IPPNW. It was an offspring. And initially we talked about promoting the renewables, as an alternative to nuclear power. Later, we became aware that there is a lot of energy in resources, so we started to discuss resource management and savings from resources. And since the last 3 years, we have a new topic which we discuss. We discuss the topic of sufficiency. Sufficiency means lifestyle change, getting rid of excess weight. How much is enough really to live healthy and comfortably? And these 3 terms can be subsumized as efficiency, consistency, and sufficiency. Efficiency means increase the output, for example, by energy production with alternative methods, solar, solar thermal, wind, geothermal, hydro. This is known in many places in the world, and it's a flourishing business. Consistency means saving what you can, megawatts, resource utilization, biomass fermentation. And even in industry, you can obtain the energy from products. Sufficiency is the individual lifestyle change, using more public transport, cycling, avoiding heat loss by insulation, lower the flow temperature in your central heating system, increase the vegetarian diet versus eating meat, or subsistence farming. Now, if you talk on a global level, what needs to happen? We need a so-called energy convergence. That many of us in here who come from rich and technologically advanced countries, we are not so advanced, in fact. We are wasting a lot of our energy. And we wasteful countries, we need to reduce the energy waste. And then we need to introduce consistency, efficiency, and sufficiency, as I have just explained to you. Poor countries or poor societies, they already are much further than we are because their footprint is much smaller. They live more modestly. They use subsistence farming. So they are doing all they can already in the sufficient field. But many of these countries, they need to be allowed somewhat more energy for development. So as they need more energy, they need to go on the same path as we need. They need to introduce the consistency and efficiency methods. So we both need to do the same. We need to go towards a sustainable energy policy, a sufficient and efficient lifestyle. Now, in Switzerland today, we have about already 57% hydro, 40% nuclear, and 3 other sources. We don't know what will happen, but in 2035, there will be no more nuclear energy. We don't know how much the hydro and other energy will contribute, but the major measures possible to implement are insulation of houses. That gives a lot of job. That process has started already in Switzerland. We need more utilization of biogas and electricity and electric cars. We need to increase the biomass utilization and solar thermal utilization. And many people already use a lot of public transport. And what was mentioned today, this morning, cooperatives have a very big have importance, because if villages get together and build 1 or 2 windmills, they can supply the entire village. So this is an excellent suggestion. Here is the Swiss future without nuclear. You see the nuclear is the red one. It should end even before. This is a slide which is a few years old, so it was considered that even in 25 we are without nuclear power. I don't think that will happen so quickly. The water, the hydro energy stays about the same because we already use a lot of water, but there is photovoltaic utilization, geothermal utilization. Now we have 2 scenarios, a modest scenarios, modest growth, and all the statistics always have shown that the predictions of a high growth is not a reality. So if we have the growth as we expect, we should be fine with added photovoltaic, insulation, sufficient methods. But we also have the right to get energy from abroad, and we may buy wind energy additionally. I'm coming to the second last slide. Pardon? The pink at the top. The pink is right to get electricity from France and from abroad. Now, this is the Greenpeace scenario. They are even showing that we can go down about half with the energy consumption. This is just a graph which shows the consumption and not the production side. And I have to be short. And the final slide shows that there are really positive facts around trends. In wind power, in 2000, projections for wind-generated power globally reached 30 gigawatts. But in 2014, installed wind power was 370 gigawatts. The solar predictions were 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. In 2010, we had 17 gigawatts. And in 2014, 48 gigawatts. So it's an enormous acceleration of the implementation of these renewable sources. In Germany, the phase-out decision saved the German consumers some 11.2 billion of euros. And electricity generation, an example in Spain. Spain now produces more wind versus all other sources of energy, including nuclear. And Spain is a proud member of this club. Brazil, China, Germany, Japan, which all are the same, produce a lot more energy with wind. So the horizon does not look so bleak if we look at the figures, if you believe the facts. And I have not talked about phasing out uranium, and this is why we are here, and this is why I now give the microphone to Klaus Biegert. We would like to launch a global campaign to ban uranium with you, with everybody at this meeting, and I give now the microphone to Klaus.
Klaus needs an introduction. Thank you very much. Andy, that was excellent. Klaus Biegert is a journalist and filmmaker, 30 years experience working in the field of making the world nuclear-free. He is the originator of the 1998 concept of a Nuclear-Free Futures Award, and maybe somebody in this room will win it one day. Here's Klaus.
Thank you. I would like to talk a little bit about what to do to make the problem known. I'm teaching at the School of Journalism in Munich, and I was talking about uranium mining, and a lady threw up her hands and she said, "My God, I never thought about uranium mining. I thought uranium is just there." And I thanked her for her openness, and I said, nothing is there. Whatever we use today, we steal. And our society is based on plunder. And so the campaign to stop uranium mining could be followed by many campaigns. The problem is that uranium is poisoning us and other metals do not. They just destroy the earth, but we could begin with uranium. I would like to talk about how to get the public be aware of that. And that's why we started in 1998 the Nuclear Free Future Award as an outcome of the World Uranium Hearing. And I'm happy to see that many from the hearing are here at this symposium. And we figured that it is important that we have, usually the whole topic is bad news. So how do we bring in good news? And we decided to create a foundation in Munich to honor people who stand up for a nuclear-free future, to honor their stubbornness, and some risk their lives. So we have the Nuclear Free Future Award has 3 categories: resistance, education, and solutions. And we are a foundation who has no money. We collect the money every year, the money we give out to the laureates. So with the award, we create a situation where you can honor people and also give thanks to the ones we don't know. And Our foundation was asked if we could be the home or the house or the umbrella for a world campaign to ban uranium mining, a global ban. And we have given it some thought, and we have come to a scenario which includes an own bank account. We will, with crowdfunding, we hope to have an ongoing process to raise money for people around the world who would like to, for example, buy a page in a main newspaper, because we cannot always wait for journalists who are on our side and editors who say, yes, we should write about you guys, etc. If you buy a page, then it's your page and you know how to fill it. But of course, those pages cost a lot. But we should not limit our ideas by saying, oh, we will never be able to do that. Yes, we will be able to do that. And if a small group in India, for example, wants to buy a page in the Hindi or the India Times, then we would post it. We will create a new website designated to the global ban on uranium mining, and then it would be one of the projects we would raise money for. We will also raise money to create an atlas of the atomic age, but focusing on uranium. And the idea is to create an atlas which is kind of interactive, so you could zoom in an area and then you would meet people who are talking to you, and then you could communicate with them. You see their emails. And we would also be able, if the whole website is in English, when you go into an area, you could find documents in the local languages. And if a small initiative fighting uranium mining would like, they cannot have their own website, then we would create a website for them. And so that would be the beginning of this campaign, because it's like you meet somebody, you need a card with your address. When you talk to somebody about the global campaign, in today's world, you have to give an internet address, you have to have a link, you have to, how do I learn more? And of course, this website would also be a service station, so to speak, that who else is fighting in this area. When we had the World Uranium Hearing in '92 in Salzburg, the most powerful thing was in this week that people who came from isolated areas met other people from isolated areas. And this solidarity was an incredible power. And I think we have to count on this, that there are isolated areas around the world, and if we connect them, they are not isolated anymore, and they are not tiny anymore. They are a powerful strength. And I think it's important, as a journalist, I know when you write, of course you have to get your facts right. But when you write neutral, say, well, I'm writing about uranium mining, I give 50% of my story to the nuclear industry and 50% to the people who are suffering from uranium mining, for example. Then it is so-called objective, but it's nonsense, it's bullshit, it doesn't lead to anything. But the facts have to be right. And the stories which create turbulence are the ones where you provoke. And in my career as a journalist, whenever I created something, I stepped a little bit over the line. There was the subarctic people were fighting against a campaign which made it impossible for them to sell the seal skins of the seals they eat. The media just mixed up the protection of the baby seals in Newfoundland, the clubbing of the baby seals, and subarctic indigenous people who live off these animals. And a delegation from Canada came to the United Nations, to the Working Group of Indigenous Peoples in Geneva, and I used this opportunity to write about this issue. And the title of my story was Protect Natural People from It only works in German. Schützt Naturvölker vor den Naturschützern. Protect indigenous people from environmentalists. Yeah? But the game of words only works in German. The last letter of environmentalists, Naturschützern, didn't fit in. And the editors changed it into Greenpeace. Without I was away, I couldn't. Yeah. So the title was Protect Indigenous People from Greenpeace. The moment I learned about it, I called Greenpeace and I said, this happened, so you better prepare an answer, because when you read it, time goes by, this is a monthly magazine, and da-da-dum. So they prepared an answer which was very weak. They were not prepared for such an attack. Years later, I was when we were working on the World Uranium Hearing, we tried to get money from Greenpeace, and which we got a little bit under the table. We shouldn't tell anybody. And then the second director of Greenpeace in German, the German chapter was the most financially the most powerful one. So I can say Greenpeace because German office was leading. And he walked by and he said, by the way, your story, we changed the policy. From now on, when Greenpeace is starting a campaign which involves indigenous people, we have indigenous people at the table. So, because the last letter did not fit in, you know? So you have to provoke. And I don't know how we are time-wise, and I don't know how we are. Yeah, because and how many questions you guys have, but I have
15 minutes for questions after.
I have with me a little film by the Yes Men in. It's 9 minutes, and it's an example how to ridicule the ones in power. We could play it.
Okay, is the group open for? Sure. Well, I mean, I thought they're great.
Gunther said that he wants to take time for more of an interactive discussion.
Well, this is, I don't know about the title.
Okay, let's get a little consensus for the group who wants to film.
Well, we could have the film at the end.
Look, it just needs delayed lunch. That's all it needs. We can go till 20 after or 25 after. I think we could pull it all together.
Okay, hurry up,
We could
let's
use
do
the
it.
time.
Let's do it, hurry up.
Let's maximize on the experience here, right? So
Get
go
on
for
with
it.
it.
Do the film
Roll the film.
Just
Get on
film
with it.
and questions, and you'll be a little hungry.
Roll on, and we will use the questions.
Let's talk, Klaus.
Yeah. So
This one is yours?
do the questions first, and then film later.
Film now,
No, film now, and that's the question.
we might have questions on the film.
9 minutes, no, we'll be able to do it.
Klaus.
Yeah.
Greenpeace knows the environmental justice movement is based on the racism of environmental groups. So it's good that this has reached Germany too.
Who in this group never heard of the Yes Men?
We knew there was a way to pull the plug on big oil. But we needed some help. Ever since we met Gitz, we wanted to do something together. Posing as government bigwigs, we would infiltrate a Homeland Security conference and announce that the USA was outlawing fossil fuels and replacing them with renewables. And the best part? The new wind and solar power plants would be owned by native tribes as partial reparations for genocide.
To actually have white people wearing bands that say native headdress instead of a feather, a windmill, this is us making fun of the American ideal of what it is to be Indian.
This would truly be a second Thanksgiving. I told the conference that I represented General Colin Powell, and they were pumped to have him speak.
So our speakers are running just a tad late. We're not going to worry about it. General Colin Powell is coming to speak to us, and he's bringing a couple of colleagues.
General Powell, of course, would not show up, but his colleagues were nearly there.
Oh my God, you guys. Is this not going to be a total giveaway?
No.
Is there a way to, like, you know, maybe make it a little less like it is?
Who's the other person?
Well, the Admiral, and he's followed by the Deputy of the Secret Service. So you've got two, like, exceedingly senior people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to just confirm with them because he's so late. I'm beginning to wonder what's going on.
Mr. Benedict Gordon. Hi, I'm Barbara Alexander. I'm so glad to meet you.
Hello? Hi.
I'm nervous. Me and Tito are sitting down. We're trying to make small talk.
Have you tried yoga?
No, not yet. I need to. I'm having a hard time finding the yoga pants that'll fit.
That's the most unique I've ever seen on a thing.
He's a scientist. So
Did he do like a lot of like somebody went.
I don't know. That is a bad hair day. These guys weren't exactly tree-hugging eco-freaks. We had an aspiring Republican congressman, a two-star general, lots of defense contractors, and weird security guards in trench coats. How would they react to an energy revolution?
Our first speaker is Undersecretary of Policy Implementation at the Department of Energy, Mr. Benedict Waterman.
On behalf of the Department of Energy, I'm very excited to announce today a great new plan that will do nothing less than convert the United States energy grid into one that's powered entirely by renewable sources. As the dire reality of climate change becomes more and more inescapable, people will take the future into their own hands, and historically, we know that popular resistance is a force that can only with difficulty be countervailed. A revolutionary energy program today is easier than a real revolution tomorrow. By 2030, America will produce 100% of our energy from renewables, establishing us once again as a global leader in confronting the supreme challenge of climate change. We're excited to be working with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and some of the largest tribes from Arizona to the Dakotas to site major wind and solar facilities that will provide a large chunk of America's power. The tribes will own these facilities. It'll provide an enormous stimulus to the economy and great resilience in the face of future threats. It's time for a second Thanksgiving.
I am Dana Slowhorse. I'm the Director of Industrial Development for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I am a member of the Wenatchee Nation. Joining me is my nephew here. He's a fire chief, he's a war chief, a water chief, and he's actually also a midwife. He helps young mothers. It's a long sordid history between the Americans and indigenous peoples. And it always hasn't been a beneficial relationship, at least not to us. For the first time, we have a voice, and we will own, truly own, this new energy production. And that's progress. And it'll build us a stronger economy, a brighter future. It will give something to our children. There was a lot of work done Benedict's task, because we want to acknowledge and honor that. And so I actually went and killed a deer. I tanned the hide myself. Give you this gift.
That was good.
This grand collision between our two peoples. We want to acknowledge this with a round dance. And I encourage everybody to join us together. Form a circle around all this if possible.
All the way around.
Yeah, we can go all the way around. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me. I composed this song for this occasion. I made it a simple song so we can sing it together because it's not just my song, it belongs to all of us. Way out hey, way out ho, way out ho, way out hey, way out ho, way out ho, way out hey now, way out hey now, way out ho ho ho, way out ho ho ho. The sun gon' shine, the sun gon' shine, the wind gon' blow, the wind gon' blow. That's all we need. That's all we need to continue to grow. To continue to grow. Way out there. Way out there.
It would be worthwhile, I think, get an opportunity to perhaps, chat with you or your staff, or whoever you deem appropriate.
What kind of effect do you expect this to have on the share price of the energy companies today?
This is ultimately going to benefit the economy tremendously.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
How did the midwifery come about for you?
So, yeah, I have a lot of sisters and
And a lot of grateful nieces and nephews.
definitely.
So we're part of Northrop Grumman. We're a large business, but very interested in seeing how we can support this novel cause.
It's fantastic. So excited.
Yeah, this is outstanding. I feel really good. It's a very emotional day. Great.
I was surprised to see someone from Northrop Grumman acting so excited. You weren't talking about weapons, you're talking about renewables.
You know, surprisingly enough, most people are not megalomaniacally insane. Even people who work for Northrop Grumman. And if they're given the opportunity to do what they actually believe in their hearts is the right thing, they go with it.
The fact that we could get all these people that we think of as being from the dark side to dance in support of renewable energy is that there are very few people who actually want us to continue on this fossil fuel path. And we have to force our leaders to actually do what we need them to do, and then people will follow. Except for a few oil company execs.
Good stuff.
Thank you, thank you.
Right.
Don't forget that song now, you sing it anytime.
Okay, we're opening the floor for questions for our really expert speakers. Where did Andy go? You could join the table here, please. So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you for all your presentation. This is actually more so a comment for Andy and for the room. It's just on how we're framing some of our messages. So one thing that I picked up from your presentation was we're talking about the trends on how solar, like, countries are changing things, and a lot of it's larger scale. Oh dear. Maybe this will reach. But one of the comments I want to say is in your presentation, I saw a lot of the individual responsibility of taking public transportation and becoming more of the vegetarian diet and other individual behaviors. Coming from a public health background, I know that there is a huge challenge for us to change the population's individual behaviors and responses. And what I find to be more effective is for us to be changing the environment in which we live in. So therefore, getting our governments to change it so that we provide public transportation, because if it's available, people will use it. That if we are pushing for solar power or other types of sustainable energy, we're more likely to be, if there's at a fair rate, people will choose that over the poor choice. So that's just one of the messages I think that we need to think about is when we frame our message is trying to push it more on whose responsibility is it? The individual responsibility is very challenging to change.
You are right in a way that to change society and individuals' behavior is much more difficult. But if you rely on technical methods, if you talk to people who understand about energy needs for the whole society, and you, for example, go about and say, we will replace with photovoltaics, and photovoltaics will replace all the nuclear power plants, you identify yourself as somebody who does not get the real picture, because the technological methods, biomass, solar, they will not in an individual country be able to quickly replace the entire needs for industry, etc. So it is honest to admit that about 60% of the entire effort needs to address the society. And that can be done, and it is being done in Germany and in Switzerland, because people are using more public transport, expenditures for public transport rise, etc., etc. It's a part to be included in the discussion on an energy future. You need to talk sufficiency measures too, besides the efficiency and the consistency, besides saving energy and besides producing more energy. You need to be honest. It's more difficult, but you cannot just give the whole responsibility to the government and not...
Shared. They're not mutually exclusive. There's another comment here.
Yeah, okay. Well, just to go back in history for a little time, it's 10, 15 years ago, photovoltaics were still pretty expensive. So instead of discussing what the government should do, people in our country got together and created cooperatives. Like for one person wasn't able to do a photovoltaic thing. So they got together like 50 or 100 people to share in a cooperative, everybody puts in money. They bought the photovoltaic panels, put it on some roofs, and there you go. And then people learned that works. Same thing worked with wind turbines. The companies came and said, "Oh, we want to put up a turbine in your countryside." Yeah, so people said, no, we can do that ourselves. So the money comes back to the community. And also a number of communities, municipalities now have in Germany have decided to develop 100% renewable energies for their energy needs within the next 5, 10, 15 years. And that takes away from the nuclear energy and from the, as Michael explained, from the centralized energy production. This is why they fight so badly. So it's not so much, what the government should do. Forget the government. They will never do anything. So it's us who can do something and who can make a change, not only in the political field, as I explained before, but also in all renewable energies.
You wanted just a closing?
Just I'm not by any chance belittling the individual movements. It's just when you think of, for example, I think in California, when it comes to water sources right now, golf courses are using major waters. The individual saving the shorter showers, it's doing nothing. It's very minuscule in the greater picture, and pushing for larger institutions, not just governments, but other institutions, pushing for those changes I think are very important.
I think we agree. It's just that we need every kind of endeavor. They're not mutually exclusive. Here in Quebec, we have relatively inexpensive electricity, but we waste so much electricity. And when the government put on little extra dollars for refurbishing homes to make them more energy efficient, people took advantage of that. And they spent the money to refurbish at a cost saving in taxes. Sure, so the persons did it, and the government did it, and we don't waste energy. There were more questions here. Go ahead.
And it's just the best argument for a campaign in international, because we want to have a bottom-up campaign, so people understand that some countries are a little bit further behind than others, and that's a fact.
Thank you very much. Years ago, I was at a conference in Moscow, and Helen Caldecott mentioned wave power and the fact that there'd been a way at last to convert wave power into energy, and it was already sustaining big communities in Norway, I believe. I don't hear about wave power, but since our Earth is covered with so much water, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to develop more?
It's happening in France and Normandy. Spain. Yes, you're absolutely right, and it's another way for sustainable energy. I think it's too far to drag this.
Okay, I'll just speak now because I'm used to that anyway.
Yeah.
In Saskatchewan,
So our three activists are challenged here by a local problem, but it's a local problem, but it's a planetary problem. Do you want to comment?
Honestly, Candice, I think those modular reactors, they are nothing just than a draft. It's not working. It's hundreds of miles from being realistic. So, I mean, we haven't really gotten into that. But it's, I think they have this pebble bed modular reactor. They shut it down in West Germany. So those guys who were working on it, they went to South Africa and they started all over again. And it's still not working 20 years or 30 years later. So I think it's a lot of it is just propaganda. Yeah, I understand.
Have the government read the Michael Schneider report as it was presented this morning. If they haven't done it, they don't have the information. It's information and communication and people power, which we need to change issues. And that's why we're talking about the campaign in this meeting. We cannot. I've showed you the situation in Switzerland. Switzerland is a small country. We have only hydro as the own natural resource of energy, nothing else. So the sun, we have not reliable sun irradiation. Yes, we have sun, obviously, but it's not as in some African countries and in Australia. But every country has individual needs, obviously, and some countries, unfortunately, have a lot of contamination, as you have in Saskatchewan, and the problems pose themselves differently. But you know, we need to be pragmatic. We go from here to a state in 30 years where we have hopefully no more nuclear power and no more active uranium mines, and that needs to start, and we are the ones to start it. And I cannot give you a recipe how to go about specifically in Saskatchewan, and you understand that.
I think you were before, actually. Go ahead, Jim.
Tim Judson, I'm the Executive Director at the Nuclear Information and Resource Service in the U.S. I think in the U.S., we're seeing a very full-fledged and vociferous campaign by the industry to save itself from exactly the trends that Michael Schneider laid out this morning. And I think what he laid out is exactly correct in our experience. But I think the other implication to what Michael has laid out is that we have a certain weakness, which is that the nuclear industry, in terms of what's going on globally with energy, is basically irrelevant. They're struggling to hold on to what they have and to hold on to any relevance whatsoever. And I think we see that playing out, especially with respect to the debate over climate change. And the climate movement broadly, has really not paid attention to nuclear at all. And I think we understand the threat, but I think what we need to do in order to accomplish the mission that we sort of set forth in this workshop, is to be able to make the issue of nuclear power relevant to what's going on more broadly in the energy space. And I think that what Michael laid out as well is that the solutions to phasing out nuclear power are the exact same solutions as to addressing climate change. And what we're seeing in the U.S. especially, is a full frontal attack by the nuclear industry, and in its interfaces with the fossil fuel industry to attack renewables and climate policy. And I think that from our perspective in the U.S., we had to be, as the anti-nuclear movement, actively engaged in, protecting the integrity of climate policy and the aggressiveness of climate policy, as well as renewable energy and efficiency.
I think it's very well put. Should we go into other questions? Because I'd like to hear from other people in the room. Go ahead.
In Blind River, chemical uranium refinery is the only game in town. And I don't know if you've been following the news, but Blind River is probably going to go into receivership over a $50 million loan they took out. They took out a $50 million loan to try to develop a solar power project, and then they found out they couldn't feed into the grid because they didn't have the infrastructure. Then they invested the money in Plasco, which went bankrupt. So I don't know how a town of 3,500 people gets a $50 million loan, but they did. And now they're on the hook for it. But the point is that Cameco is there as the only major employer in town, and they are they consistently, since the 1980s, have splashed money around into the curling club, the hockey club, the golf club, everybody. You have a book club, you have a library, your high school, everything is Cameco. So to pull, to threaten to, I just wanted you to talk about the threat of pulling that big ticket item out of a small, poor community. It has no other, really has no other need.
Anybody want to comment on that?
I comment first on you. Are all the houses in that community fantastically insulated? Do they have roof insulation, good windows? That creates jobs for a few enterprises. So to convert, instead of just getting a big loan, if the individual homeowners would get together and you would establish some sort of fund where small enterprises could thrive in this village and maybe get the knowledge and maybe even supply their knowledge to neighboring villages, that would be a better way than just to buy a huge, invest into a huge solar plant. Well, yes, well, it's difficult if you go from a point where you're backwards because you made mistakes. But looking forward, I mean, that could be some policy which would make sense. And to answer you regarding the link with climate, I have asked Ian Fairley if he plans to go to the COP21 meeting in Paris in December, where they talk climate. And Ian Fairley, if you have participated in his talk yesterday, he listed 9 reasons or 10 reasons why nuclear does not contribute to the climate.
We have all that. And in fact, there's, my organization and a number of the organizations in Europe and elsewhere are planning for, an anti-nuclear presence at the COP. I mean, it's more, the organizing work of building the alliances with the climate movement that I think we need to be more attentive to.
Absolutely, and I plan to go to Paris too, so we're going to meet because it's essential to address this issue. Okay.
Just to respond to Lorraine, we are very well aware of Cameco, and Areva is doing the same thing, putting out money to everybody and everything. But I think from Saskatchewan I have heard that they started a cooperative solar project, and they are really in the pocket of Cameco there. They still managed to start that, and I think there are some Saskatchewan people here, Candice has just left, who can talk about that. I think they are right in the same situation like you are, with Cameco being all around them, and the province is basically owned by Cameco and Areva. But they still managed to start that solar cooperative, and with crowdfunding, and it's probably a chance to get something going, because it's in the people's hand. It's not some big investor or something.
I'm going to take the prerogative here. For those people who want further questions, they can stay and ask those questions. And the rest of you who feel you want to leave, you can leave. I just, people don't want to be rude and stand up and go. I give you the permission to do so. Those who want to stay and hear more of the discussion, you may do so as well. Yeah, so we'll have 3 more. 1, 2, 3, okay?
I really just want to make a comment. Yeah, no, but questions always start with a comment. I think if you don't interrupt, it will be shorter. I think we can end uranium mining, that's possible, but nuclear phase out is almost, in a sense, in a realistic way, is impossible, because nuclear waste will be with us for a very long time, and there is no way you can phase out nuclear waste for a very long time. So I just wanted to clarify that there are limits to nuclear phase out in that respect, and let's not be too optimistic about and gung-ho about that we can do it. I don't think we can phase out nuclear waste is my point, basically. Thank you.
Good point. In the back, please. If you use the mic, it goes on the camera. That's why I'm sure.
Well, I'm willing to make fun of the United States as much as anybody else. What a bunch of goofballs. But thinking that there is not a real energy resource in Indian country and the tribes really aren't doing those things is not good. It is not good. It is not a joke. There are intertribal crew wind turbines in South Dakota. Peabody's now proposing to take its reclaimed Black Mesa mine and make it a solar station. Of course, one can always tell success when the other side adopts your ideas. So it's much more important to be respectful than to make jokes of people who are on the front line, in my opinion. And so I'm wondering, the question is, in the US, where we have largely stopped uranium mining, I think that we have chased mining to more vulnerable places. And so that kind of responsibility is not always acknowledged. And so it's one of the contradictions underlying, we could stop something here, but that makes people weaker there. So I'm interested in how some of those thoughts have been considered during this Stop Uranium campaign. Thank you.
And of course, we're talking about Africa particularly. I know that a number of you have been busy in that area, especially going to Mali, etc.
Well, maybe this is exactly what we see. And I quote that again when this cooperative CEO said the future is in Africa because Canada and the United States and Australia have been too sophisticated in their regulations. So this is why we try to work with people in countries, in African countries, in Mongolia, in India, because they don't have all the information that we have, at least not readily accessible. So that's the reason. And this is also the reason why we think we need a global campaign to stop uranium mining. Because if we say uranium mining no in Germany, not in France, not in the United States, not in Quebec, hopefully, and some other places, they will just go to some African countries and pass some bucks under the table and say you have your license. And we are faced with that every day. And we work with these guys, and it's important that more people get involved in that and that we have a global ban on uranium mining, that they not just can seek out the most impoverished and most marginalized communities.
So maybe you could mention some of the things that are being done in those places, which I know you've been to, because it's not just buying ads, that's not the whole campaign, that's just a graphic element. So if there were an action or two you could mention, I'd appreciate that.
Actual actions, because I think the action of having a full-page ad in the Bamako Daily to alert the people of Mali that they're being poisoned by uranium mining could be a very powerful tool. The editor might get shot or put in prison, but at least we could afford a full page in the Bamako, which is Mali, newspaper. I thought that was a brilliant idea.
We did more than a full-page ad. We went there and had a symposium. And then after the symposium, we went to the distant region where they were planning a nuclear uranium mine. And we talked to the people and we visited the places and saw the fountains, the sources which were drying out. And we met the Canadian company Rockwell, which was exploring there. And Rockwell left the place without even paying the workers in Falea. So we have done much more than just sending an ad. We have gone to Africa and talked about uranium and health and the economic side.
There's one issue that gets not enough attention. For example, in Tanzania, an Australian company found a uranium deposit. Uranium-1 from South Africa got into it, and finally it was bought by Rosatom, the Russian company. Now they have a full-blast uranium mine inside the World Heritage Area Selous Game Reserve. We have big difficulty because even the nature protection organizations, they are not catching on to it. I mean, there's no people living in the area directly because it's inside the park, and the people who are there in the area and who try to speak up against it, they are faced with harsh consequences by the district commissioner. He forbids them just simply to have any reunions, any meetings, to speak out about it. So they have to be very, very under the table and hushed up to meet or anything. So, but it would need like nature protection organizations which come up and say, no, we don't want to have uranium mining within a World Heritage Site. And stuff like that. So that's support that's needed, and where we need more people to catch on to it.
Last question. Definitely last question, because I've already been given a signal.
Linda Gunter from Beyond Nuclear in Washington, D.C. Just a couple of quick observations about the campaign, because I know that was sort of the original premise of the presentation today. I think it's very important. It's going to be very important to take into account two things. One is the language differences, and the fact that you will have some access to things in the native tongues of the countries you're talking about, very important, because that's one of the observations I've noticed here, is that people just don't know things because they aren't in their languages. And the other is the cultural differences, and I think that's the biggest difference. When you talk about Germany and what's been able to happen in Germany, that has a lot to do with the cultural sort of background of the country. Michelle left, but one of the things I think, that she talked about is very sort of American-centric in terms of our outrage at being told that we have to switch something off or do without something. Whereas in Japan, after Fukushima, when they had to conserve energy, I mean, it even got to the point where women cut their hair short so they didn't need to use hair dryers. I mean, there was that willingness to jump in and participate. So it's going to be a little bit of a tweak, I think, each time for the global campaign to reach people through their cultural understanding of what's important, their linguistic, the language as well, and not just the we tend to sort of plan everything in rooms like this, and we're all sort of from the same similar background, so that will be very important. And one last thing about what you just touched on, Günther, I think, is that I'm very into animals, and I feel like the wildlife and nature, we always talk about what might happen to human beings and humans, and we don't talk about what happens to animals, but we have a huge constituency of people who really care about wildlife and domestic animals, and what we saw coming out of Fukushima, was heartbreaking. The cows, the dogs, everything else. So that's a constituency, I think, that we should really work hard to bring on board on a campaign like this, because it's beyond human life, it's all life, and there are a lot of people who might lend weight to that kind of campaign.
Good points. I think we're going to have to end here. Sorry. I'd like to... Organize. Let's give our speakers a good round of applause. This has been an amazing discussion. Thank you all.